Of all the fashion events and industry rumors in 2024, this was probably the biggest one, the creative director situation at Chanel. Some may even say the creative director chaos at Chanel, which was finally ended on December 12th, 2024, when the brand announced that Matthieu Blazy would take over as creative director, and they filled a post that had been vacant for months. Everybody was speculating who would take over. In this video, I'm going to discuss this new path for Chanel. Who is this Matthieu Blazy? How is he going to influence the brand? And what are the expectations from Chanel to Matthieu Blazy, the new creative director? As a side note here, this is a non-sponsored video. I'm just sharing my personal opinion and my research here. This announcement in December finally ended the months and months of speculations of who is going to fill this prestigious post. Just a quick recap here, what actually happened at Chanel. Karl Lagerfeld passed away in 2019, and he had been the creative director for almost 40 years. Please forgive me the term, but I would actually call him a dinosaur in today's world, because I can hardly think of any creative director who can make it that long or will make it that long at a brand, because 2024 already showed in which times we are in. A lot of journalists called it the year of musical chairs. I'm not a big fan of this term because everybody kept repeating the term, but it shows very well that a lot of creative directors are forced to move on very fast. Somebody is at a brand for 3 to 4 years and then they move on. And needless to say, this is a very high pace. And I sometimes wonder how these people work, because we all know when we change jobs, it takes us about a year to learn everything, to adapt to the new environment, to also get to know the people you work with. And these creative directors are dropped in these posts and immediately they have to function and deliver. Yes, we can say they are leaders. This is what we expect from them. They also get a very high salary, all of this. But still, there is a lot of pressure on them. And if they don't perform, not necessarily in terms of creativity, but more in terms of numbers, they have to leave. Lagerfeld at Chanel was a very long time. He very much shaped the house, because just briefly, after Coco Chanel passed away, Chanel was not where we would think it was. It was not this very aspirational brand. It had become a brand that was a bit out of date, we could say, very classic, but also maybe a bit old-fashioned. And then Lagerfeld came in and gave it a new twist. And people were also apprehensive of what this German designer would do to a house like Chanel. But then over time, we saw how he shaped the house, and he was very, very successful with it. And today, many people, when they think of Chanel, they also think of Lagerfeld, or when they think of Lagerfeld, they also think of Chanel. And when he passed away, of course, there was this void. There was a lot of speculation, and I would say it was not easy to fill those shoes. And then the company decided for Virginie Viard, who had been with Chanel for also 30 years. She was a very close collaborator of Karl Lagerfeld. He even said in interviews that they worked very closely together, that he knows her very well. He even said, she is my right arm and my left arm. So it already shows that this decision was for somebody who knew the house, Chanel, but also Lagerfeld, and she definitely also understood how to work within the structures of the company. At the time, I think it made sense from a business perspective why they picked Virginie Viard, somebody internally who knew the business, and everybody was waiting for her first collections. The expectations were very high. I also have to say I felt a bit bad for her, because filling the shoes of a Lagerfeld was not easy. Yes, we can always say as a leader you have to do it, but still, it was almost 40 years of Lagerfeld, and then somebody who is not known to the outside that much has to deliver. That's also a lot of pressure. So in the beginning, I was a bit more forgiving. I was looking at the things and said like, okay, she also needs to find her groove. She needs to find her language, because before, yes, she worked with Lagerfeld, but now it's about herself, establishing herself. And she actually stayed in this role for 5 years, even though it feels a bit shorter. I don't know why. But over time, the criticism became louder and louder. A lot of people said they don't like the collections. I also have to say I was not a big fan of them. Mostly it was not the items or the garments themselves, because sometimes she really looked into the archives and tried to bring them to our times. But for me, it was just the styling. I don't want to go into the details. I'll just say two things here. The flip-flops and the stockings, it really killed everything. So the criticism became louder and louder, and people said she needs to go, there needs to be somebody new. So there was something going on at Chanel, and the criticism was not only about the collections, it was also in general, the brand was criticized also for quality issues, especially with the bags. So yes, the bags are not only the task of the creative director, but this is also this overall environment that Chanel faced in 2024. A lot of people, especially online, criticized the quality of the new bags. They said there are these price increases. There were quite a few in the past. There were also complaints about customer service. So all of this kind of created this environment that, needless to say, then also the creative director Virginie Viard had to face. But Chanel on the outside kept backing Virginie Viard because the CEO Lina Nair in an interview said in May 2024 that she does not really see a need to exchange the creative director because since Viard took over, the business more than doubled, their earnings hit 19.7 billion US dollars, so everything is fine. And then suddenly at the beginning of June, Virginie Viard exits the brand and everybody was surprised. I remember on the day when I read it, I was like, this doesn't make sense. Where did she go? There was just this press release. You did not really hear what happened, but suddenly she was gone, and it happened so abruptly that people started asking questions. Why would you then suddenly make such an abrupt change? So there's a lot of speculation. I think we will probably never really know what happened, or maybe only in 10-20 years it will get out. I'm not going into the details of this here, but if you want to learn more, you can head over to Super Jacob's channel. He has quite a few videos where he discusses this topic at length. He also did live streams to this, so I really recommend you check his channel and videos out. But let's come back to the present. So for months this post then was vacant. And it's actually interesting to see how long it took Chanel, or how long they took time to find somebody. And there was so much speculation the whole summer and autumn. People were discussing, there were rumors that Jacquemus might take over, no comment about this. There were rumors about Galliano. I like his designs, but it was a bit unrealistic given his comments in the past, which I'm not going to reiterate on YouTube. And then when you look into who owns Chanel, I don't think this is very realistic. There were also rumors about Hedi Slimane or also Jonathan Anderson. So everybody was talking. And I think nobody expected the announcement on 12th of December that Chanel decided for Matthieu Blazy. And where's Blazy coming from? He was the creative director of Bottega Veneta. Just one thing before I go into the details here about his name. When I first read the name and read that he is French-Belgian, I would have said Matthieu Blazy, and this is also what I'm going to say here. Maybe I'm wrong, maybe I'm naive, I don't know what I'm saying, but I heard many different pronunciations of that name, especially from English native speakers. My favorite was Matthieu Blazy. So I'm not entirely sure this is how I would say it. If you know if this is correct, please let me know in the comments below, but this is how I'm going to move forward. And this is just a very small thing. It really drives me crazy when people don't do the research and when they don't even try to say names correctly if they are not in their native language. Everybody makes mistakes, and even if you do the research, you might say it wrong, but I think it's just good behavior, I would say, or common courtesy that you at least try to find out how to say these names. So according to my research, Matthieu Blazy, so this is what I'm going to say. Please correct me if I'm wrong. Anyways, Chanel announced the news, and then I'm sure out of all these potential contestants, Matthieu Blazy was the guy most people had to Google because he was not one of these rock star designers. He took over as creative director of Bottega Veneta when Daniel Lee left the brand. And actually he studied in Brussels at La Cambre. He was born in Paris. And then he also did internships, for example, at Galliano and Balenciaga. Just to give you the quick rundown of all the brands that he has worked with, his first job after graduating was with Raf Simons. He then moved on to Maison Martin Margiela. And then he also joined Celine under Phoebe Philo. Polo. And then again, he worked with Raf Simons at Calvin Klein before joining Bottega Veneta. Blazy is known for his focus on craftsmanship and also his innovative approaches to materials, textiles and leather, for example. And he is also credited with this upward trajectory of Bottega Veneta, which already started under Daniel Lee. So let's look a bit into his design approach and aesthetics to also see what we can apply to Chanel. When you look at Blazy's designs, one thing becomes very clear. He is not like other designers or colleagues where you can immediately tell it's Matthieu Blazy. For example, when you look at Galliano, very often you can see it's Galliano. When you look at Michele, at Phoebe Philo, you get this feeling. With Blazy, it's more taken back. And I read in interviews that he's actually very often stressing the fact that he does not want to be in the spotlight. For him, it's more important to create something, and this should be in the spotlight. This is his focus. Furthermore, he also very often emphasizes that he wants to create wearable fashion because he says he knows that what he creates for Bottega Veneta, or in the long run now Chanel, is something expensive. It's an investment, so he wants to create something wearable, which also lasts, but at the same time, he does not want to create something which is boring. And he also says he does not really like this term timeless. He got a bit tired of it, but for him, it's important that you can wear something and enjoy something for a very long time. So I think if he applies this, if he can apply this at Chanel, this is a very big positive, because I think this is what a lot of customers want. You pay quite a bit for these garments and also for the bags and accessories, and you want them to last and enjoy them for a very long time, but also see that they can be fun. They should not be boring just because you have them for a very long time. Sometimes there's this discussion, shall I buy this bag because it's a classic, it will always fit, but sometimes you want something which is interesting and it will stay interesting for a very long time. And this aspect that he does not want to be boring, he also showed with some weird accessories, I would say. Sometimes you have these exaggerated headpieces that he used. So this is also a signature of Matthieu Blazy. And closely linked to this approach of making something wearable which is interesting or not boring is also his approach of innovation with materials, how he works with textiles. One of his most known pieces from the runway is probably the tank top and the jeans, which were actually not made from cotton, they were made from leather. And he said in an interview that it was quite a process to make this, because in the beginning he talked to the design team at Bottega Veneta and they said like, oh, this is not possible, we can't do this. And it took them, I think if I remember correctly, it was 30 iterations, but then they made it happen. Similarly, for fall winter 2023, he created these boots that looked like knitted socks. They were also made from leather. I'm not sure if this is my style, but it's a fun idea, and it may be something that he translates into Chanel. Maybe when we think of these special editions with the bags, the Minaudière, for example, maybe this is something where he applies this approach. Maybe this is also something that Matthieu Blazy is going to apply at Chanel. Maybe we will see different interpretations of tweed, or maybe tweed made from other materials. Maybe it doesn't have to be that literal, but this would be interesting, and I do hope that this will also shift the focus a bit more to the garments, prêt-à-porter and haute couture, because in the end, I sometimes find it sad because most people, when they think of Chanel, they think about the bags, which are a big part of the brand. They are probably the major driver of the revenue, but Chanel is also garments, and I hope that this will also refocus the discussion or refocus the focus on the garments again. And also one thing I have to say, when I look at Bottega Veneta under him and then his predecessor Daniel Lee put Bottega Veneta on the fashion map in a different way. This was the time of heavy social media. He blew up the signature leather weaving of Bottega Veneta, and then he also launched the bags in different colors, for example this pale blue, but also this signature green, this very intense green that became a trend. I personally have to say I never really liked it, but this is a personal thing. I was also not a big fan of these garden boots or necklaces. For me, it was too gimmicky, but I think this was just the times that he wanted to play with and also capitalize on. I would like to know what you think about this. Did you like Bottega Veneta under Daniel Lee, or do you think it became better under Matthieu Blazy? Let me know in the comments below. Blazy also launched some designs for Bottega Veneta where it did not really click with me. For example, Dua Lipa's naked dress for the Barbie press tour, or also this no pants trend that he kind of launched. This is not really my style. Some people loved it, but what he was very successful with, and this may have been a decision-making factor for Chanel, was the It bag. When he took over as creative director, the pressure was very high. His first collection was fall/winter 2022 and he had to deliver. And he not only delivered this very first collection, he also managed to launch an It bag in this very first collection and create a hype around this bag. And this was the sardine bag. So this was this slouchy bag also with this signature leather weave. It is kind of a moon shape, and then the handle is a metal sardine. And this sardine is inspired by the sculptor Constantin Brancusi. And this is also an important detail, that he was inspired by the art. So we will talk about this in a bit. And this bag immediately hit a nerve. So many people wanted to have it. There's also a special edition that came out a bit later where the sardine is made from Murano glass. I think it was 25 pieces. The handle was always different. It cost 11,000 US dollars and they sold out immediately from what I read. At least the 3 pieces that Bergdorf had sold out immediately. Some may say he was lucky, others say he really understands the market and he comes up with innovative designs. I do think it was a decision-making factor. At least if I had been making the decisions at Chanel, I would have looked at him and said, okay, he can do both. He can do the garments and also the accessories. He managed to create these It bags, because the sardine bag is not the only one. There's also the Andiamo bag that he designed. So maybe this can be translated to Chanel. Maybe there will be new models of Chanel that become iconic, because let's be honest, the flap bag is a classic, but they also need additional bags that keep the business going, keep it interesting. So this may be a factor. Another thing that I kept hearing in all the podcasts and videos was that people hope that because of his focus on craftsmanship and quality, the quality will come back to Chanel. This is what I heard online. Let me know in the comments below if you agree with this and if you also hope that this will change. But I think this is quite a challenge to ask this only from the creative director, because yes, he himself may have this focus, but this is not a decision that the creative director makes on his own. The numbers dictate. So if they say we need higher margins, we need to save on certain things, that's not entirely only the creative director. He gets a budget and he needs to work with certain things. I'm not saying that this is not a path that he's going to take. Maybe this will change and these alleged problems, quality issues, despite the price hikes, will change, which I think a lot of people would be happy about. But I think we can't demand this from the creative director alone. This is an overall brand topic that needs to be addressed. This leads me to another thing, which is not the fashion per se, but it comes from this whole, he managed to create hypes, he managed to create a hype around an It bag, he managed to sell. When you look at Kering, the group which owns also Bottega Veneta, we can see in Q3 2024, Bottega Veneta was one of the exceptions that actually had positive growth. A lot of other brands had issues. For example, Yves Saint Laurent had issues, or also Gucci had issues, which is like the flagship brand of the Kering group. So maybe the Wertheimer family and also the advisors of Chanel looked at his track record and said, in times where a lot of brands struggle, this brand that was led by Blazy in creative terms actually did really well. So maybe this was also another factor why they hired him. Speaking about these numbers, I would also address something else. Blazy is very often called young. He is 40 years old. And then people said he was probably hired because he's young and he's not a superstar designer, and Chanel had a certain budget which was not high enough for the superstars. These are rumors that I could not 100% confirm. I think this is very difficult to confirm with a privately owned company. We will never know. But it may have been a factor, it may not have been a factor. If you know more about the salary dimension, also please let me know in the comments below. But I would like to say something about the age. When I see a leader in business is 40 years old, for me this is not young. For me this is actually quite an average career for a high-level manager. It is possible at the age of 40. And also when we look in the industry, yes, we say maybe he's younger than some of the rock star designers, but for example, there are peers like Olivier Rousteing at Balmain, he's 39. Anthony Vaccarello at Yves Saint Laurent is 43. So that age did not really surprise me. I do think this whole superstar factor, not only in financial terms, let's leave these aside, but this whole factor that he is more a designer in the classic sense, so he's trained as a designer and he's not so much about his own personality, might be a reason why Chanel chose him, because a superstar designer also comes with kind of a baggage. They also have their own personality, their own views that they want to transport. They also want to show their design aesthetics, and maybe Chanel wanted somebody who says, I focus on this whole design aspect, craftsmanship aspect, but for me at the moment it's not that important to be such a public figure. Maybe in the long run he will turn into such a public figure. Lagerfeld was not this public persona that he created from the beginning. It also took a long time until he developed this. But I do think Chanel may prefer somebody who is more in the background, who focuses on the products rather than having this rockstar allure. Again, this is my opinion on it, or these are my assumptions. I don't know if this was really the decision-making factor. And one thing that Blazy definitely is, he is an antidote to the Pharrell Williamses of the industry. Also, one big discussion in 2024 was this whole who can become a creative director. Is it actually worth training as a designer, or is it more important to create content on social media or become a celebrity and then take over? And I think there were reasons why Louis Vuitton opted for Pharrell Williams, but there are also reasons why Chanel opted for Matthieu Blazy, and it actually shows. I think it's both. So you have the classic track that you train as a designer. You also have this other track that you're a celebrity or you're an influencer on social media, or you create content. I personally find it a good signal that somebody like Matthieu Blazy with a more classic background became creative director of Chanel, because I think it's also a big signal to the industry, also to young people in the industry who are just starting out and maybe they kind of were lost, or they lost faith in that whole career path. And then it's a signal, no, it's still required to also be trained as a designer, to know what you're actually doing. And this is either equally important or maybe more important than just the content you create on social media. I'm not saying that people like Pharrell Williams are not successful designers. I'm just saying here that this is this kind of polarizing discussion within the fashion industry, how certain people become creative directors. But Blazy is more in the background, but that doesn't know that he doesn't understand the power of social media, because when we think about his most recent show for Bottega Veneta, there was a lot of buzz, not so much about the collection, but around the seating, because he had these big bean bags that were animals. There are rumors that the animals were assigned to the people, to the guests who were sitting on them. So there was a lot of buzz around how he actually staged this whole runway show. And looking at it now, knowing that he is the new creative director of Chanel, it kind of reminded me also of the Lagerfeld shows, because these megalomaniac shows by Lagerfeld sometimes also overshadowed the clothes. Because my favorite example is the supermarket show, which had this interesting runway show setting, but the clothes, I think most of the people kind of forgot. Like, tell me if I'm wrong about this, but this was just my opinion, because Lagerfeld wanted to create this Gesamtkunstwerk. I can understand this. For me, sometimes it was a bit too much. But I do think that Chanel also saw what Blazy did at the runway shows, and that he does more than just presenting the clothes. Like, his approach I know it's not going to be similar to what, or the same what Lagerfeld did, but is he able to also deliver a show that is more than just presenting the clothes? And this leads me to a detail a lot of people overlook, and this is the close relationship Matthieu Blazy has with art. When I first saw these beanbags, I saw it out of context. I saw Bottega Veneta show and everybody was like, oh, it's so cute, these animals. I was like, oh, another show that has an approach that kind of distracts from the clothes. I'm not sure. But then I did some research and I found out that these beanbags were made by the Italian design company Zanotta. They have been producing these beanbag chairs since the 1960s, I think 1968, and they did a special limited edition with Bottega Veneta and made those animal beanbag lounge chairs. And this was not the first time where Blazy merged fashion with design and art, because, for example, for Spring-Summer 2023, he collaborated with the Italian furniture designer Gaetano Pesce, and they made these resin chairs that looked a bit fun. All of them looked a bit different. So you can already see he's heavily inspired by art. And this is something that I took from his CV or his runway shows, his collections, that is a bit similar to Lagerfeld. Because when you think of Lagerfeld, he was interested in so many things: photography, design, literature, visual arts, classic arts from Asia, all of these things, and they also influenced his collection. So what I do hope is that this influence from art will also heavily inspire Matthieu Blazy and make the Chanel garments, the accessories and the shows a bit more interesting again. As I mentioned before, he wants to create something lasting and wearable, which is not boring, and maybe art is the vehicle for that. And I would like to come back to these house codes. No matter which podcast I listen to, article I read, video I watch, I always hear, oh, the Chanel house codes. Every brand has certain codes, and in the case of Chanel, I think they are a bit, let's say, over-communicated recently, and there are many, many details of this brand that can be taken up. Some house codes are more obvious than others: the stitching, the pearls, the color schemes, whatever. But I think sometimes house codes is misunderstood. This does not mean that you have to take something and just replicate it. I think you can work with it and make it more interesting. It does not mean that the Chanel bag always has to have the same stitching, or that it always has to be black and white, or the pearls, just because some people think you need to see house codes. Sometimes house codes are more important than in other times. This is just my personal opinion. So I do hope that Blazy manages to find this balance between these house codes, not making them too literal, but also making the brand interesting and also lasting and wearable. We still have a bit of time until we see what he will actually do at Chanel, because his first show is only Spring-Summer 2026. So this will be September, and I think it's going to be interesting. I also heard somewhere that Chanel aimed to hire somebody for a time period of 10 years. I don't know if this is true, but it would be good to have some consistency if somebody stays longer. At the same time, I don't really believe that anymore, because the pressure in terms of financial numbers is so high. I'm sure they will give him some time, but if he doesn't deliver fast, he also will have to leave fast despite this time horizon. We have seen this previously. So I think it will be an interesting year. I actually look forward to him. I want to give him a chance, and I want to see what he does at Chanel. I wonder what you think about this. Are you also curious what he's going to do, or are you saying, no, this is not at all what you expected for Chanel? Who did you want to take over as creative director? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, please let me know by subscribing to my channel if you haven't done so already, and also liking this video. You can also read more fashion related articles on my website, thepinklookbook.com, and feel free to check out my fashion label Pelagona. And now I talked a lot about present day Chanel and also the house codes, and to understand them, we need to look a bit into the past. And I also made another video where I share the 7 basic facts that you need to know about Gabrielle Chanel. Maybe this is interesting for you. Thank you very much for joining me in this video, and see you in the next one.